So here is a formal hello to everyone and welcome to our deliberative town hall. Now, this evening, we're going to talk together about a real and important political issue, one that is on our ballot here in Oregon this fall: rank choice voting. Now, our goal is to see if there is perhaps some common ground on how we collectively see this issue. And we hope that forums like this will be a first step in a journey to improve trust and communication between our citizens and their elected representatives, something that has been somewhat badly eroded in the past few decades. And we also hope that it may grow into a model that can be a regular part of the democratic process. My name is Terry Bush, and I will be moderating this session. And as participants, you will be able to introduce yourselves to each other in your first breakout. So here we'll start by introducing the Braver Angels team. Other than myself, our organizers for this workshop are Sue Staley. Sue, if you're there, wave. And Jeff Spitzer. And Lise Keith will actually be serving in two roles tonight. She will serve as both our breakout room manager and as our participant manager. Now, some of the time, we will be talking as a whole group or in small group breakout rooms. But I'll tell you, it's a very tight schedule if we want to be done by 9 o'clock tonight. So we will move rather briskly through this workshop without cutting off any important information so we can complete it on time. All right, here we go. So a little bit about Braver Angels. Braver Angels is an organization created to bring Americans together, bridging the partisan divide and strengthening our democratic republic. We do this by sharing the skills we need for better listening to, speaking on, and understanding of political viewpoints that can be very sensitive. Braver Angels does not seek to change anybody's mind on the issues, but we do seek to change people's perspectives on those who may hold the opposite viewpoint from ourselves. Our hope is to help people to learn to see those on the other side as valuable people who just have followed a different path in life and have come to different conclusions on the issues. Now, along these lines, I want to now lay the foundation for tonight with some expectations we ask you to abandon. We are not here to solve a problem. We are here rather to understand the ideas of others and to help others understand our views. We are not here to change anybody's mind. The only one who can change your mind is you. And it is the goal of us to encourage you to do that for yourselves. Abandon the idea that we are likely to agree on facts or on logic or on data. We see and understand the world through our own viewpoint, which shapes our logic and provides the meaning we individually attach to data. We are not likely to agree on what is right and what right looks like. Even as we are all here to make our country and communities better, we simply have different definitions of what better is. And as a reminder for all our workshops, Braver Angels core guidelines are always in our workshops: to listen and be respectful, and to honor the moderators and timers. Now, tonight, participants, you will have a chance to hear two different, or what we would call biased, perspectives on ranked choice voting. And you hear that from our guest panelists. Now, I say they are biased simply because all perspectives are biased. But that's really the point. By hearing their different perspectives on this issue, you will have the opportunity to glimpse the world from an optic perhaps different from your own. And above all, tonight we hope to give you more information about an alternative voting method so that you can understand it better and how it may be used and how it may actually affect your life. So with that as our foundation, let's take a look at our agenda for tonight. We are currently in the introduction section of our workshop, where we've already covered our goals and ground rules for our time together. After this, we will break into small groups of participants in breakout rooms. Your group will have an opportunity to introduce themselves to one another and give voice to some thoughts about this topic and why you came here tonight. Then you will have an opportunity to hear our two guest legislative panelists regarding their differing views on ranked choice voting. Following these presentations, you will enter a second breakout. You'll be with the same participants, where your task will be to come up with some objective questions that you'd like to share with fellow attendees and to ask one or both of our guest legislators. And then in our final hour, we will dialogue with our legislative guests and hear them respond to as many of your questions as time permits. And then we'll wrap up at the end with a evaluation form and a few last thoughts. Okay, one last point of clarification before we begin. Please understand that this discussion tonight will be solely focused on voting methods, not on the full voting system. As you can see on your screen, we will not be talking about mail-in ballots, voter access, voter ID, open primaries, and we will not especially be talking about the Electoral College. Now, here is a brief video which covers this process pretty thoroughly. It focuses on the state of Maine, but as you will hear from our panelists, we are pursuing a system that is pretty much parallel to what you're going to hear on this video. So sit back and listen to what the video has to say about ranked choice voting.
The state of Maine is now using ranked choice voting for state legislative primaries and for federal elections, including the United States presidential race. Ranked choice voting does not apply to the general election races for governor or the state legislature. Ranked choice voting allows voters to choose candidates in order of preference. The votes are tabulated in rounds until only two candidates remain, and one candidate is determined to have received the majority of the votes in the final round. That candidate is then declared the winner. Here's how the tabulation works. Let's assume that there are 4 candidates for the United States Senate. Let's say that blue is your first choice, the person you would most like to see win for that elected office. Yellow is your second choice, and if neither of them can win, you'd rather see purple in that office before orange. So you rank purple third and orange fourth. You are not required to choose more than one candidate if you do not want to participate in ranking. Your first choice candidate for that office will be counted on election night. If no candidate receives a majority, the voting will move into ranked choice voting rounds. All of the ballots and tabulator memory devices will be transported by courier to a secure location in Augusta for counting. Let's take a look at how all those votes will be tabulated. On election night, none of our candidates got a majority of the votes. So we move into round one of the ranked choice process. Orange received the fewest votes, so it will be eliminated from the race. But the people who voted for orange as their first choice will still have a voice. Their second choice candidate will be revealed, and their vote will go to that candidate. In our example, 3 of the people who voted for orange chose blue as their second choice. So blue receives 3 more votes in round one, bringing its total to 11. The other 2 people who voted for orange chose purple as their second choice, so purple receives 2 more votes in round one, bringing its total to 9. Yellow's votes are also moved into this round. The round one totals are blue 11, yellow 10, purple 9. Now we're on to round 2. Purple is eliminated, but purple voters still have a voice in round 2. Those 7 people who voted for purple as their first choice will have their second choice revealed. Of those 7 voters, 4 voted for orange and 3 voted for blue. Orange is no longer in the race, so those ballots are exhausted and are removed from the count, since these voters did not rank any other candidates. The 3 votes for blue are added to the total for blue, bringing blue's total to 14. Now we look at those 2 votes that purple received when orange was eliminated. These voters chose orange first and purple second. Now we look at their third choice. These voters chose yellow as their third choice, so their votes go to yellow. Yellow now has 12 votes and blue has 14. Thus, in round 3, the votes for blue and yellow move forward. With only 2 candidates remaining, blue has the majority. Blue is named the winner of the election. Here are a few things to keep in mind when you're marking your ranked choice ballot. If you vote for more than one candidate in a single ranking, your vote won't count since we won't be able to tell which candidate you really want. If you decide to skip a ranking, your choice will be bumped up to the previous ranking. In this example, the skipped ranking will be ignored and Spider-Man will be counted as your second choice. If you decide to skip 2 or more rankings, though, we'll only count the votes before the double skipped rankings. If you only want to vote for one candidate, you can do so. If you choose the same candidate in multiple rankings, only your first choice vote will be counted and will carry forward into subsequent rounds. So this is the same as a single first choice vote. Determining the winner of each election will take a while, given the size of the great state of Maine, but we'll report the unofficial results as soon as they are ready, so you'll know. The state of
All right. I hope that helped elaborate the process we are talking about tonight. So now it's time to begin our dialogue as a workshop. To get the conversation started, we have assigned you to a breakout room. We've chosen breakout room members at random to mix together different views and different perspectives on this issue. In this first breakout, you will meet each other and discuss what is important to each of you about this topic. You will be with the same group later when we begin to formulate questions for our 2 guest panelists. Time is important, so please be precise in this first breakout. What you want to share with each other are introduce yourself and where you live, and tell what is important about this issue to you. 1 or 2 sentences, please. So Elise, are we ready to go?
Ready to go.
Welcome back, everybody. Up on your screen is today's topic, Oregon Measure 117. I'll give you a few minutes to read through that for yourselves. All right, and now it's time for the introduction of the two people you came to hear tonight. One of our speakers will be Representative Charlie Conrad, who is a Republican from District 12 in our state legislature. And he will be followed by Representative Ed Diehl, also a Republican from District 17. So by flip of a coin and mutual agreement, Mr. Conrad will go first. So Mr. Conrad, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate it. And good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for being here and listening. This is a conversation that I'm excited to have. And one of the things that when we voted on this back in 23, where these were the conversations that I was hopeful to have. And I was hopeful to have them because when we voted on the floor, it was referral to the people. Had we voted that day as the legislature on whether we wanted to implement ranked choice voting, I probably would have been a no because I didn't know that much about it. But over the last few months, I've been involved with it a lot more, talking about it a lot more, researching it, and I am strongly in favor of it. So happy to talk about it and happy to explain why I support it and the benefits that I see it's going to have in the state of Oregon. So with Measure 117, it is ranked choice voting in the general, and there are certain offices that it is for. And so that's what we're looking at and we're talking about today. One of the things that has come to me over the last few months as I've been looking at it and paying attention to our politics and our political environment in general, it is the power that parties have. And being people, we're all self-interested. Parties are manifestations of us, and they are also self-interested. One of the benefits that I see from ranked choice voting is that this system allows the opportunity to pull that power back to the people. So we can take a little bit of power back from the parties because we have more options. So right now, for many of us in our plurality system, we have two candidates. Every now and then we might get a third, we might get an independent or somebody else on there. But for the most part, we have two. We get the most Republican, you get the most Democrat. And then you got to choose one of the two. And depending on your preference, whether or party's important, whether the person's important, whether some of their policies are important, it's that mix of different things. So what this system actually does, it provides us an opportunity as voters to perhaps get more people into the mix, to get more people that might represent us a little bit better than that limited kids menu of choices that the parties have been giving us for a while. And that's why I support it, is because I want us to be able to pick who's going to represent us and who's going to advocate for us. And this provides that opportunity. And I keep saying opportunity because that's what it is. If we don't take advantage of it, if we continue to vote as partisan, we only vote one party, whatever that party might be, we have the opportunity, but we're not taking advantage of it. This provides us an opportunity for people to take advantage of. The other thing that I like about ranked choice voting is there are a number of different variations that you can have. This is something that is made by humans to manage our government, which is there to manage our interactions. It is by its very nature going to be flawed. It's going to have some things and some trade-offs that we need to talk about and discuss. But there are ways that we can mitigate some of those depending on what do we want to mitigate and how do we want to mitigate it. We can mitigate some of the issues. If you have 15 people on a ballot, really is there a difference between number 12 and number 13? No. You can shorten it. You can have fewer people on the ballot. You can limit it to 3, 4, 5. Usually are the common numbers because after 5, we as humans, our psychology and decision making and choices, it gets convoluted and some of us just kind of back out of it. The other things that you can do with ranked choice voting in the way that it can be structured is that candidates from multiple parties can be on there. Depending on, again, we're not talking open primaries, but that is one of the variations that can happen with this. So this is something that can grow and evolve depending on what we want. There are different things that we can do to try to mitigate some of these things so that we get the best possible outcome and the best possible representation. But one of the things that is talked about with ranked choice voting is that it's always going to moderate. It's not always going to moderate. It can, certainly can if you get different flavors of different parties, different folks in there. But one of the things that it's really going to do is, again, provide that opportunity for the best representative from that district. If it's a really conservative district, you're likely going to get a really conservative representative out of there. If it's a very liberal or progressive district, you're probably going to get somebody that represents the district that way. It works both ways. It is a way to bring forth the person that's going to do the best representative of that. There are some of the opponents talk about some of the logical flaws with some of the way that the votes are counted. And there are technical phrases, there's a whole science behind elections reform. But one of the things, and Alaska is a state that has it, Maine is a state that has it, but with some of the previous Alaska elections, those are used as case studies for why it doesn't work. Those are exactly the case studies for me why it does work, because the outcomes produce the best candidates for that. One of the aspects why people oppose it is head-to-head. So if you have three candidates, and if A beats B and B beats C, then the transitive theorem should be A should beat C, right? It's just back to basic algebra and geometry. If A is bigger than B and B is bigger than C, A has to be bigger than C. But what some of those things fail to take into account is that we're people. We are multidimensional and our decision making is irrational. You can't have linear, algebraic, and geometric theorems to describe us as people in our decision making processes. You know, if I have three flavors of ice cream, if I have chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry, I might prefer chocolate to vanilla. I might prefer vanilla to strawberry. So therefore, according to the transitive property, I should prefer chocolate to strawberry, right? No, if it's a hot summer day, I'm going to go with a strawberry. I want some frozen strawberries in my mouth. If I just had a steak, I'm going to go for some chocolate. If I'm going to have affogato, if I'm going to pour some espresso over that, I'm going to go with my vanilla. Some of those mathematical linear theorems fail to take into account context. And context is really important for us as decision makers. We as people are multidimensional and we're irrational by our very nature. And that's one of the things that we can work this system, and it provides opportunities and it takes that into account. It gives us a chance to take advantage of those opportunities should we pursue that. So I will stop there. I won't use my full 10 minutes. And then I look forward to the conversation and the questions that come after.
Thank you, Charlie. All right, Ed, your
Before
turn. Yes.
Before we move to Ed, I want to thank Charlie on behalf of Braver Angels for stepping in for Senator Solman, who had family things and couldn't be with us tonight. So Charlie, thank you so much for stepping in last minute and sharing with us.
All right, Ed, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you all for hosting this. Really appreciate it. It's something I suggested a few months ago that we might want to talk about. And so very happy to see it. And Charlie, it's great seeing you again. Thank you for stepping in. Charlie and I serve together, and we serve on some committees together, actually. So, all right. So this election, Oregonians will decide whether to make major changes to our election system, impacting how we vote and how our votes are counted. And Measure 117 would implement statewide ranked choice voting. We already have it in Benton County. Portland is just rolling it out right now. You know, and Charlie makes a compelling case that there are problems with our current system. I agree with him. Our current system is not perfect. But before we make fundamental changes to how we vote, we need to be absolutely sure that we're making things better and not worse. And that's the problem I have with ranked choice voting. I don't view it as an incremental step forward. I view it as a step back. And people who would want to see election reform will be disappointed with this, and it may actually hinder our opportunities for true election reform. So there's several things that I believe all of us should demand in any election system. I think it should be easy to vote. It's got to be accessible to every voter, regardless of age, race, income, disability, or education. It needs to be secure and controlled locally. It should be easy to tabulate. It should be transparent and easy to audit. It should yield predictable, timely, and understandable results. And I don't believe ranked choice voting under Measure 117 does any of these things. Ranked choice voting complicates the voting process, resulting in more ballot errors and disenfranchised voters based on numerous post-election studies. Now, not every study shows this, but some studies do, and that data should concern every Oregonian. Take Minneapolis, Minnesota, for example. In a 2009 ranked choice voting election, affluent precincts had a ballot error rate of 2%, while less affluent districts saw error rates of 20 to 27%. And ballots with errors are not counted in instant runoff rounds. So that disproportionately impacts certain voting populations. New York has seen similar problems, as have other districts. RCV also complicates the tabulation process. With an RCV election, it's impossible to tabulate the results at a precinct or even a county level, as current state law requires. Tallies must be done, as it showed in the example there in the video, must be done in a central location all at once. Unlike Maine, we're probably not going to truck our ballots to one location. We'll probably send electronic cast vote records, digital copies of the ballots, to a central location. And the centralized tally approach reduces transparency and complicates the audit process. Today, our audits are real simple. I can walk into the county clerk's office. They have a bin and a secure location for each precinct. You can go in there, pull the ballots out by hand, and do a hand count for that precinct and compare it to the tally that you got with the scanner. That can be done precinct by precinct. Such simple audits are not possible with ranked choice voting. Now, I'm not claiming that ranked choice voting is rocket science. It is doable with a computer, with the right software. But we already struggle with trust in our elections, and reducing transparency and complicating audits will only aggravate trust issues. Centralizing the tally opens us up to more chances of fraud. It's just inherent in centralized computer systems. And we got to remember, just last year, the DMV suffered a data breach during routine, secure data transfers, resulting in 3.5 million Oregonians losing or revealing their voter registration data to pirates. Ranked choice voting can also yield wonky and unpredictable results. The outcome of RCV can be highly random and unpredictable, making it hard to know whether changing your support for a candidate will help them win or help them lose. And that's just not a desirable feature in any election system. So in addition to these basic requirements of any election system, ranked choice voting fails to live up to its promise of fixing some of the known issues we have with plurality voting. The proponents do point out real shortcomings in our current system. However, RCV doesn't fix them. Proponents claim that RCV leads to a majority vote. That's only true if you redefine what majority is. As you saw in the main example, they reached a majority at the end of the rounds, but that was not a majority of voters because some of the ballots were exhausted before the end of the rounds. So they've redefined what majority means to claim that it yields a majority result. They also claim that RCV eliminates the spoiler effect, and unfortunately, it doesn't do that. So the spoiler effect is when you have a third-party candidate you really like, but if you vote for them, you may cause your other favorite mainstream candidate to lose. It's definitely a shortcoming with our current system, but ranked choice voting doesn't fix it. The election scientists understand this flaw, and there are numerous examples in practice, and I'd love to talk to you about some of those later on tonight. But in a classic example, you can have a candidate that would win in a head-to-head race with either the two other candidates, yet get eliminated during the instant runoff. And that is simply an inherent flaw with ranked choice voting that I don't think we should accept. Proponents also claim that ranked choice voting provides a deeper, richer understanding of voter preferences. And I agree with them on that. It does, because I can give you that example of the head-to-head competition where somebody would win head-to-head yet be eliminated during instant runoff. That kind of data is available by looking at the voter preferences based on ranking. However, the problem is when you start doing instant runoff, much of that data is thrown away. And in the process, preferences of some voters are ignored, denying them an equal voice in the election. In many cases, once a candidate's eliminated, the voter preferences for that candidate in later rounds become irrelevant. So in this way, RCV, as proposed in 117, ignores the opinions of some voters, and that is inherently undemocratic and unfair. There's another fatal flaw inherent with ranked choice voting, and this is a weird one. Getting more first place votes can sometimes hurt your candidate's chances of winning. I know this sounds too bizarre to be true, but it is true with ranked choice voting. And I look at this and I go, why would anyone have a voting system with this kind of inherent flaw? But it's there with ranked choice voting. Some proponents also claim that RCV leads to more moderates being elected and that it tones down the political rhetoric. There's no real good evidence for that. In fact, the election scientists will show you that RCV, ranked choice voting, suffers from what's called the center squeeze effect, where more moderate and compromise candidates get squeezed out, actually leading to more extreme candidates being elected. This is actually a well-documented issue with ranked choice voting. I've heard the response, well, yeah, these problems exist, but they're really rare. The truth is they only come out when it really matters. And that's when you have more than two strong candidates. And in those situations, these flaws can rear their ugly head. And in a significant number of cases of elections, 15% or more elections, this comes up. And that's simply unacceptable, in my opinion. So I know I've kind of dived into the weeds here on ranked choice voting, but I think it's important to understand how this works. The proponents show you simple videos and slogans and flashy text messages and brochures, but it hides the flaws that are inherent with ranked choice voting. I want to emphasize something here. The opposition to Measure 117 is not a partisan issue. The Marion County Democrat Party is opposed to 117. The Oregonian Editorial Board recommends a no vote. Just today, the Willamette Week recommends a no vote. The District of Columbia Democrat Party rejected RCV in 2021, stating in part that we should introduce measures aimed at strengthening voters' trust and confidence, not introducing convoluted processes that will further alienate voters and exacerbate the public's distrust in our electoral process. The head of the NAACP of New York called ranked choice voting voter suppression. And 2 years ago, the Multnomah County Democrat Party thoroughly studied alternate voting methods and abandoned ranked choice voting as an option for many of the same reasons I've noted above. There's a lot more to talk about, and I'm looking forward to this discussion. There's things related to funding and money, why legislators were carved out of this bill, many other things. So I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Well, Ed, Charlie, I add my sincere appreciation for really your thought-provoking contributions to this topic. And I'm sure you've given our audience an awful lot to think about and generated quite a few questions in their own minds. So at this point, we want to get you all together to talk amongst yourselves, to compare your impressions of what you heard from our two guest legislators, and agree on a set of a few questions that you want to present to either one of them or both of them together. And so to accomplish this, we're going to put you back into your breakout rooms. You're going to be with the same people you were before. And we're going to give you roughly 8 minutes to discuss this topic and complete 2 tasks. Decide on 2, 3, 4 questions that you want to ask. And above all, assign a spokesperson for your group to ask your questions. Now, we're going to try to let every breakout group have at least, I think Elise and I were talking about this before, at least 5 minutes, correct, for their presentations? Elise, are you there?
Yes. Yeah. Each group will have about 5 minutes to be in the
Okay, about
interviewer
5 minutes.
seat.
Okay, now,
Mhm.
one final piece of advice. Asking objective, open-ended questions is hard. So think very carefully about how you phrase your questions. Good, objective questions seek additional information. They seek clarification. They begin with openings like, I'd like to know a little bit more about fill in the blank. Or I was a little confused when you were mentioning this. Could you please clarify? Fill in the blank. All right. So try to avoid expressing your own opinions or creating a loaded question, which is an invitation for an argument, not for an answer. So off you go to your breakout rooms. You'll have about 8 minutes to decide what questions you want to put, and then each of your groups will have a chance over a 5-minute period to address our 2 guests. Elise, send them in. Yes, welcome back. And I'm hoping you all have appointed your spokesperson, especially for the first group who's up. And Elise, who will that be?
So group 1 is Amanda, David, Laura, Luke, and Margaret. Who is your spokesperson?
Woohoo, I won the lottery. This is Amanda.
All right. Hi, Amanda. Okay, I'm going to spotlight you.
I think it might be
our
a different.
I think it's
I
a
think
there's
different
multiple
amount.
All right,
That wasn't
Amanda,
our
we're,
group.
But
we're
but
ready.
that
We're
yeah.
ready for your first question, Amanda.
All right, we'd like to know more about how the votes are going to get tabulated. We're still confused about the process.
So the mechanics of it, or the way the
Um,
ranking works with instant runoff?
Yeah, more the latter.
Okay. So that video, I understand why it is so different than what we've done, but I'll try and explain it. The video does a pretty good job with it, but think of it this way. You fill out your ballot, you pick your first choice, your second choice, and your third choice, for example. And so all those ballots are brought together and they tally up the first choice tally, just like you would in any regular election. And they look at who got the least number of votes.
Mhm.
And they eliminate that person. So then those ballots, the people that voted for that person, they look at who was their second choice. And they give that vote to that second choice person. So if it was Bob, Sue, and Mary were the 3, and Mary gets eliminated, you voted for Mary first, you voted for Bob second, your vote gets transferred to Bob. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And then that process continues until someone has a majority of votes. Now, in some cases, you may have only ranked Mary. Say you only ranked Mary. She gets eliminated. Your ballot is what's called exhausted. So there is no vote to transfer in your second round. So your ballot's no longer counted in the denominator when they figure out what a majority votes are. So
Okay.
I hope that
Yeah, that helps.
And a second question?
Yes. Does a large pool of candidates complicate ranked choice voting? Because I'm speaking from District 4 in Portland with 30 candidates.
Oh, Are you there? Is that where you're from?
That's
Okay. Well, yeah, I think it does complicate it for a number of reasons, and Charlie may agree with me here. In fact, he hinted at it. There's only so much information that you can absorb, right?
Mhm.
Studies show it when you have too many options, you don't make necessarily better decisions. But I think it's more than that with ranked choice voting. So let's say you have 20 candidates, but you can only rank 6. I think the ballot
Yeah,
your ballot
6.
has 6. So you rank let's say you fill it out diligently and you rank your 6 candidates in order. Well, let's say what happens down the road after when they go through this iterative process is some people, you may end up with choices in the later rounds, none of which you voted for.
Mm.
So your ballot's exhausted, and now you're making a decision to elect 2 different people that you didn't vote for, but you may have a very strong opinion. You know, one's a good Democrat, one's a Marxist, okay? You may have a strong opinion on that, but you didn't include them in your top 6. So I think that's a serious problem. In New York City, this scenario it wasn't a Democrat and a Marxist, but this scenario came up. 15% or 140,000 voters their ballots were exhausted before that final round. To me, that's like having a runoff election where you didn't get a ballot. And to me, that's a real serious problem.
Terry, can I chime in there?
Yeah, absolutely.
So this picking up on what Ed talked about last, I think if it's the same scenario, that where there were 5 folks on that ballot in New York, 45% of those people ranked all 5. You had a certain number, I think that's the number that he talks about, that 15%, where they only ranked 1. So again, opportunities. If you want your ballot to be counted in that very last round, again, it is redefining what a majority is. But if you rank all your candidates, and you do it so that you don't, accidentally, color in 2 circles or anything like that, where they don't know where to attribute your vote to, all the votes would be counted in the very last round. So there are opportunities, but there are some folks, regardless of what party they're in, that they can just never color in a circle next to somebody of the other party. Or they might not know enough, and for some other reason, they decide that, you know what, I really don't want to color in a circle next to somebody. I just don't know. I'm gonna go with what I know and what I think, and that's what they're going to do. So again, that's why I reinforce it's opportunities to do it, and nothing's perfect. Some of these numbers and the way that the system is that it's the same as now. We have votes that don't count now. You vote for a third party candidate, it's not going to count, and that goes into some of what Ed mentioned. It's voter strategy, and people will have to learn something. They'll have to figure out what they want to do. Do they want to vote for the winner? Or do they want to vote for their candidate and hope that their candidate wins? Because if you're trying to pick the winner like a horse race, it's a very different mindset of what we're trying to do, as opposed to how am I going to support the person that best represents me, and what message am I sending when I do that?
Okay, this is time up for group number 1.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Amanda. Well done. Next group.
And I heard that actually I got the Amandas. There are so many Amandas. We have a blessing of Amandas. So group number 1, is that you, Luke?
Yeah, I was elected the speaker of our group through consensus.
Hi, Luke. Go ahead. Far with your first question.
Thanks, Terry.
You
So
didn't
one of our
ranked choice voting to decide who was speaking?
we didn't weren't ready. That would be great. So I guess we're particularly concerned in our group about the spoiler effect. At least a few of us are, and so I guess
And your question is?
I guess our question is, does the ranked choice voting help with the spoiler effect? And the spoiler effect is that the candidate you believe in doesn't get elected because it ends up dividing the vote of the 2 main party candidates.
All right. Over to our guests. Does it?
Well, it sometimes it may help, but really it does not eliminate the spoiler effect. And the problem is it suffers the same flaw that our plurality system does. If it's a weak
Ed, you're freezing up for me.
Well, we unfreeze Ed. Charlie, any thoughts on this issue?
Yeah, I think Ed and I probably will say the same thing, but come to a different conclusion.
Did everybody freeze?
You did.
Oh, okay.
Charlie was about
Am I back?
Charlie was about to agree with you, but come to a different conclusion. Charlie, what was your input going to be?
It, so I think what Ed was saying, Ed always correct me, but it sometimes will, sometimes not. It's going to depend on the race. It is race dependent. I don't see where it's going to hurt because we already have the spoiler effect. We're not going to make it any worse. We have the opportunity dependent on the race and depending on the candidates. And again, I come back to that we're irrational and multidimensional voters. And so it depends on the choices that we select based off of the candidates and the races that they're running and their messaging to us. There's so many variables and factors that it can help. It can be neutral. I don't see where it's going to be any worse.
Could I finish before I went frozen there?
You may indeed unfrozen.
Where I think the problem is because it's being sold as eliminating the spoiler effect. And a good example of this is the Alaska election with Peltola and Begich and Palin. And in that election, in the head-to-head, because you have this rich data like we talked about of first, second, and third choices, you can see that head-to-head, Begich would have beat Peltola, Begich would have beat Palin. But what happened is Republicans split their vote between Palin and Begich in such a way that the favored candidate, Begich, was eliminated in the first round. And then he had some votes that went to Peltola, more votes that went to Palin, but it wasn't enough to make up the difference. So in that race, Sarah Palin was the spoiler. Sarah Palin was the spoiler. And I put in the chat, there's a website called rcvchangedalaska.com that has a great interactive graphical presentation of a number of scenarios. It just picks on this one election and it highlights a lot of weaknesses. But the thing to remember, it isn't just this election, but that is one particular problem. In that race, Sarah Palin was the spoiler. And people would have voted differently had they known that they could be the spoiler. I'll add that the Democrat Party in this upcoming election is worried about the spoiler effect as well, because there are multiple Democrats on the ballot, and the Democrat Party is suing to have one of those Democrats removed. And it says right in their lawsuit, it says having him present there on the ballot will confuse the voters.
Luke, you have another question? Or
I'm just curious, Charlie, do you think Alaska was a spoiler?
That case study, it is very interesting once you get into the numbers, because everything that Ed said was right. As you go through and you piece off those numbers and you look at the head-to-head, Begich won those. But so much of that then again comes down to, and this is why I talk about pulling the power back from the party. Sarah Palin ran a race that said, don't vote for anybody but me. Don't put anybody down as second or third. Only vote for me. So as you get to the messaging and how you get to the parties are going to do it, it comes down to what the people are going to choose. And Peltola, the Democrat, was in the lead the whole entire time. She had the most first-round votes. When Begich got eliminated, that put her over the top of Palin. So it comes down to what the parties are going to do, and this is going to be an evolution. As we go through, and again, it's opportunities for us as voters, but the politics industry, all the players in politics, are going to have to reevaluate how they do things and what fails. And Palin failed. She is divisive nationally, and she's divisive in Alaska, and she ran a divisive campaign, and she lost. But then that's why I go back to my ice cream example, was specifically about that race. There might be reasons why, given two, I choose one, but given all three, I'm going to make a different choice because of who we are as people.
Luke, do you have another quick question before your five?
Nope, their time's up.
Time's up. All right.
Mhm.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Luke.
Thanks, Luke.
All
There's
right,
some
room
other
two.
related to that. Yeah.
Room two. This is Elaine, Lars, Stephen, and Tom Smith's iPhone. Do you have a spokesperson?
Yes, yeah, we have a spokesman. My name is Lars. My first
Okay.
question goes to from the group goes to Charlie, which is basically we're curious, like since you said that you were against ranked choice voting and have changed your mind, what led you to change your mind?
Getting into the details. As I got into the details and I started piecing through the system, and then as I go through and I look at the other alternative methods that I know about, this is the best method. It's not perfect. There are some flaws. It has some adaptability to try and mitigate and correct some of those, and it is better than what we have now. And a lot of the things that have been brought up, you can mitigate a lot of those things. The cost, the cost, and this is one of the things that Ed mentioned. The number I hear is 5 to 8 million. I don't know if anybody's ever put the formal study together, and that passes the sniff test for Alaska and for Maine, for example. But the value on the back end is going to be so worth that. And with a 4-year runway to work through all those administrative and operational concerns that are out there, and they're valid. The county clerks absolutely have to be involved in this process, the Secretary of State. We can work through all those things. So that is, after going through and looking at, there is nothing that is a poison pill in this process that we can't mitigate and we can't improve from where we're at. And it's the best option on the menu compared to all the other alternative methods that I know about.
Lars, any other questions?
Yeah, we also talked about another question that came up was just how does the audit of such an election look like in practice? How would ranked choice voting be audited?
How would it be audited in the state of Oregon?
Yeah.
You want to take that one, Ed?
Yeah, I'm trying to look up the acronym for this, but there is a process that they go through, and it's called RLA, I think it is, but they take a statistical sample of ballots, so it becomes based on statistics. They do a statistical sample of ballots and perform a ranked choice voting count on that. And it depends on the number of ballots you have. They reach a certain degree of certainty. So it is possible. The interesting thing is that that's considered kind of the leading edge of how to audit ranked choice voting. So this is kind of state of the art, I guess. But they're still figuring it out. The other part of this that I discovered, Portland is doing kind of their own unique version of ranked choice voting. There is no agreed on method to audit how Portland's doing it. I know our topic wasn't Portland ranked choice voting, but it's fascinating to me that they chose a system of voting and there is no agreed on method to audit it.
Lars, any other questions?
There was also the question about just how, because we have the list of I've seen lists of 50 candidates, and then how you go from that list to then the final list that has 4, 5, 6 candidates. And it seems like that's 2 different rounds. But could you just briefly explain how you move from that first big list to the second list?
It's all done in the instant runoff. So if you start with 20 candidates, for example, you can only rank 5. And it'll go through 5 rounds, and the majority person at the end of those rounds is declared the winner. And that gets back to what I was saying before. You may end up with an election where you didn't pick any of the finalists. They weren't even in your top 5. You picked your top 5. So you end up having essentially a runoff where you don't have a say in it. And that's the risk when you have more candidates than you have rankings. And it's happening right now in Portland.
If I can chime in on that,
Oh, go ahead.
Terry, real quick. I agree with what Ed said. And for my part, having a ballot of 20 folks, that's a lot. And to be able to rank them, yes, you're going to be exhausted. It's similarly what we have now if you don't vote for somebody or if you vote for a minor party candidate. And that's one of the things that we as voters have to figure out and decide on, or are we good with 5 on a 20-person ballot, or do we want to shorten that up? And there's some other thoughts out there on the primary side of things, which we're not talking about, to make that happen. But for me personally, I like 2, 3, and 4. 5 is the biggest number that I've seen in terms of a ballot, a ranked choice ballot. I would be hesitant to do any more than 5 because I mentioned the psychology of choice, just that it gets to be too much and overwhelming. So that is, again, one of the flavors that we can do out there, depending on us as voters and how big of a ballot and how many decisions we want to make.
Thank you, Charlie. All right, we're ready for group number 4. Thank you, Lars. Elise, you're muted.
Grant and Rosalie.
All right.
Who's your?
Okay, I've been handed the microphone. Concerning what Rep. Conrad was talking about, the voters, we're interested in what happens with ranked choice voting when you have voters that are not.
He just froze for me.
Yeah, me
Froze
too.
for me too. Bummer.
It looks like it was going to be such
There's
a
a
good point
60th
too.
term.
You
Bummer.
froze there, Grant.
Okay,
We're just getting to something really important.
really important stuff. What Rep. Conrad was talking about, the voters, the interest is the level of education that we voters would have with all the candidates and what ranked choice voting does for that particular factor.
Did you want to go first, Ed, or you want me to go?
I think he was asking you, Charlie.
Okay. So, clearly the more voters or the more people on the ballot you have, as voters, that's the more research you have to do, the more you should be doing, depending on how much effort you want to put in that and that diversity and array. Because the more people you have, probably the smaller gap between some of those political and ideological things. And you might be getting down to tiebreakers of who has the nicest smile. I mean, you have that many people. How are you going to choose and be able to rank them? If, again, and this is why I go for the fewer number, if you have 2, 3, 4, 5 candidates, you're probably going to get some significant gaps between them. You're going to get some things that are probably pertinent to you to be able to order them and rank them a little bit different. And cognitively, you can put the time into it. If you've got to put time and effort into 3 people, you can get really in depth. If you got to get into 20, you're not going to be able to get in depth as many into all the issues and who they are and what they stand for. So again, it's one of those ways that we can mitigate it. That's why I support smaller and not the bigger side. So the whole Portland example, I am really interested to see how that goes. I'm watching that.
Okay, another question here is, could you both speak to the absolute, what does the transparency of ranked choice voting, the entire process, look like?
That's where I have some serious issues with it because there's very little transparency in the way I would think of it. Because we're sending individual ballot data, these electronic vote cast records or cast vote records, to a central location, and all at once it's run through a computer program and it's going to spit out a result. And we can see some intermediate results, but they're not going to provide us a lot of meaning. What I'm afraid of, and I wrote computer software for a living. I know how I would write an algorithm to do this thing. Like I said, it's not rocket science. But to the average voter, to explain to them intermediate results or things like that and how this works, they're not going to feel transparency in this process, especially since it takes control away from the counties. The counties can no longer do vote tallies for their county. There's no ability to do it with ranked choice voting for an election that is larger than the county.
So if with that, this is one of the things that I completely agree with transparency. I mean, in terms of what Ed and I are looking for in our voting system, I think he and I are spot on. It's just a matter of whether we agree that ranked choice is the right system. The counties currently at this point in time, they would be able to give you a summary report. So the biggest thing for me, it is a sniff test. So if the county sends that tranche of data to the Secretary of State as we go through the evening or the election process, they can give you the summary data for your county. If you have 3 candidates, you have 6 possible ballot combinations. They can simply tell you how many A got first place votes, second, and third, and then they can do that for each one of those. So again, it's just rethinking what our expectations are through the night, and as we get each of these updates, so they can give you the summary data, and you can clearly see that as all the counties are rolling in and giving out to Secretary of State can still send out that summary data of what they've got as well. They don't have to wait till the wee hours of the morning to put out one big final report saying this is it, and it's a surprise to us all. You can watch those come in. If you see somebody, consistently coming in as number 1, and then there's a large gap to number 2 and then number 3, you can go, I'm pretty sure who's going to win this. But if the gap between 1 and 2 is pretty narrow, and 3 is big enough that 2 could jump up to 1, depending on where all the 3s go, it might be a little more contentious. We might be on the edge of our seats a little bit more, wondering who's going to do it. So they can give you that summary data through the night. You can look at it, see if it passed that sniff test, and it's going to be that transparent. But we have to, again, adjust our expectations. It's not just simple more votes. We know that there's going to be another process. And again, it's only when there's going to be 3 candidates. All these other positions, if there are only 2 candidates, nothing's going to change.
Elise, how are we doing on time?
Thank you, Grant. So Donna, Jill, Sue, and Susan, who's your spokesperson?
It's me.
Hi, Jill.
Hi.
Hi.
Ready to go. Ask your
All
question.
right. Okay, I have first I have a question for Ed. You mentioned that ranked choice voting would not stop a third or could stop a third party candidate from influencing the election. And we were curious how that could happen. And the second part of that question is, what is your idea for a better way?
So a third party candidate could, I think what I said is a third party candidate could be a spoiler. It's still a spoiler. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Question? Yeah. So that is definitely the case, and we talked about the Sarah Palin example. There's other examples. Burlington, Vermont's another example.
But there was no third party candidate in there. There were 2 Democrats or 2 Republicans and a Democrat.
Okay, I see what you mean. Yeah. So the scenario would play out the same. I'll give you just in general terms. Let's say that we have a Democrat, a Republican, and a Green Party candidate. And so what could happen is that the Democrat is favored by the majority of Oregonians in the district, in every head-to-head competition. The Democrat against the Republican wins, the Democrat against the Green Party candidate wins. But let's say that there's enough Democrats that say, hey, I'm going to vote for the Green guy first, because I'm free to vote my conscience. I'm going to vote for the Green Party candidate first. There's certain scenarios where what would happen is the Green Party candidate, the Democrat would be eliminated, and the Green Party candidate would win. And so now you've ended up with somebody that's not in the middle of the voter population, but somebody that's more over to the left. This is a real scenario. This is really plays out. There is a whole website that I went to from some election scientists talking about how ranked choice voting can actually polarize the population, and that center squeeze effect, where you don't end up moderating, you actually get more extremes. And I'm not ready to throw out the system we have. I know its flaws. I understand them really well. It has a lot of other strengths. We've built an amazing country with a flawed system, the most prosperous, most diverse country in the world. But I do prefer, if I had to choose between ranked choice voting and star voting, I would choose star voting, because star voting is designed to eliminate a lot of these flaws. Yep.
Jill, any other questions?
Yes. For Charlie, our question is, what are your ideas? You alluded to this, but you didn't have time to talk about them. What are your ideas for mitigating the negative effects of ranked choice voting?
I appreciate that. It depends on the path that we go. So if we're talking Measure 117, right now we're just looking at the federal and the statewide races and only in the general. To me, again, I look at it the big system. I want to pull the power back from the parties. And over time, even though I agree with Ed, we have the greatest country here, and we've done it with plurality voting. But parties have evolved, and they've become more sophisticated, and their psychology and marketing has pulled it. They are now representing themselves, and I don't think they're actually representing voters. And so that's what I want to be able to do, and that's what this system does, is it pulls back that power from the parties and gives it to the voters. So until we go to open primaries, we're going to be still stuck with the most Republican, and the most Democrat. And then for those handful where you get a minor party or an independent that puts in, maybe it changes, but that's going to be very district dependent. Right now, most of Oregon has blue districts. All the red districts are red. And we probably have a half dozen or so that most people would consider to be those purple districts that are up, that can go either way, depending on the election and the candidates. So we need more robust. The other things that I want to see, it is the independent redistricting commission. We need all three of these legs together to really get us back into a much better spot.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jill. Elise? I'm
All
sorry,
right.
you had last comments you want to make there?
Something Charlie mentioned is, the polarization has more to do with the primary system than ranked choice voting. Australia's been using ranked choice voting for over 100 years. They still are a de facto two-party system.
Thank you.
All right, Elise.
Our next group, we have, let's see, Anna, Doug, Edith, and Sue.
I was elected as spokesperson, and we've covered most of the ground that we talked about. I think we were going to ask Charlie about how concerned he was about the centralization of the voting ballot tallying, and I think you've pretty well addressed that, Charlie. Do you have anything else you'd expand on a direct question like that?
Just specific, that's what we do now. Counties tally it at the county level, and they send it to the Secretary of State to tabulate it. So functionally, it's going to do the same thing. There are going to be some different nuances how to operationalize it and administer it. And again, some of our expectations and the reports are going to look different, but it's what we do now. And the reports that are issued, when you look at what Maine and Alaska issues out to the voters, it's very easy to follow 3 rounds. If you have 3 candidates, it's easy to follow the first round, second round, third round votes, see who gets transferred, and to see how many votes gets exhausted along the way. And some of those are because of voter education. Some of it is because their personal choice. They just don't want to rank all their candidates. And so it's easy to follow with what has happened, and I'm not that concerned with it being centralized.
Got it.
Can I comment on that, or do we move on?
You certainly can comment on it.
I see it as a lot different. Right now, let's say we have 3 candidates in a race. The county sends 3 numbers. 3 numbers. What'll happen with ranked choice voting is the county's sending the vote data. So if there's 300,000 voters, they're sending 300,000 images of ballots somehow, digital copies or whatever. That's considerably different. Another thing to remember is every county doesn't just have one kind of ballot. Marion County, for example, has over 340 some versions of their ballots as they overlap these jurisdictions and everything. Every one of those has to be audited and tested and vetted in some way. This gets much more complicated with a ranked choice voting ballot than it is with a plurality ballot. coordinating with these jurisdictions, different jurisdictions and everything, testing that ballot before it goes into operation. Again, it's not rocket science, but it's a lot more complex, and it restricts the transparency.
Doug, you have another question?
The only other thing that that came to my mind was the Ed. If I understood you right, you had made a comment near the end of your comments. I thought you said that it was possible for a candidate to be hurt by getting more number one votes, but I may not have heard that right. Did you say that?
You are correct. It's the weirdest thing. And I'll go back to the link. I don't know if it's been shared yet, but rcvchangedalaska.com, and it shows this example in this scenario.
Okay.
If I think it was 6 voters for Palin, if instead those voters had voted for Peltola would have lost. 6 more votes for Peltola from Palin, Peltola would have lost.
Was it 6 or 6,000, Ed? Just to get the magnitude.
Well, sorry. Yeah, it's several thousand. It's not 6.
Okay.
6,000.
Scaled it down. But it's a few thousand voters. If they had voted for Peltola, that would have meant Sarah Palin would have been eliminated, and then Begich, that would have been between Begich and Peltola. Begich would have won. So it's just a weird thing. And the example I give is, let's say Peltola knows that she needs to get votes from Palin. So she goes to Palin territory. She works that territory really hard, campaigns really hard, and pulls votes in. It could hurt her chances of victory. It's the craziest thing, but that's how RCV works. It's a flaw.
All right.
So the next event will be the star system we're going to examine, right?
The next event.
That would be an interesting one, and I need to brush up on it.
Thank you, Doug. Elise, next group.
All right, we've got Amanda, Bruce, and Karen.
And our spokesperson is? And our spokesperson is?
Let's see, that'd be Amanda. Oh, wait a second, they've already gone. They confused me. So sorry. Darren, Elizabeth, Gary, and Mary Miller.
I'm Elizabeth. I'm the spokesperson.
All right.
Unfortunately, both of the questions we discussed have just been answered. We spent most of our time talking about how your ballot expires, and so your vote doesn't count in the final round, and you've talked about that. And the question that we were going to bring to you was, how do you vote for a person and spoil their chances of having them lose?
Okay.
And that's what you just now addressed. And so the follow-up question to that would be to Charlie, do you agree with that as a problem, and how do you defend it then if you do?
Some of what, and I don't disagree with Ed's example at all. That's why I knew the numbers, because I've read the same information that he has. And that is one of the things. Again, this is not perfect, and there's going to be an evolution of us as voters in thinking through what we want to do and understanding how we're going to vote. And this is, again, is that opportunity to do it. And I get to 2 things: frequency and then relevancy. The scenario that it talked about, again, when you have close races, you get things that happen. And that's going to come down. It's going to evolve over time as you get candidates and you get parties and you get advocates and lobbyists and everybody else that's in the political industry involved. Messaging is going to change. But that brings it back to us as voters. They want us to vote. But what he described is the same anomaly that I read about. Could it happen? Yep. But is it going to be the 1 in 100? Do we want to ruin potentially 99 other elections where that's not going to be the issue, where we actually get a better representative that represents the district elected? And so relevancy and frequency are the 2 things that I look at. And for me, this is still the better system out there, because this is something that's going to evolve and change over time. As we go forward, all systems need rework. There is not one system in this universe given the universal law of entropy, that is not going to take energy, time, and effort to fix. And to me, this is the time to fix this. And until we get a better system, I completely disagree with STAR. This is the best system we have. So I would love to come back and talk about STAR. This is what we've got, and it's better than what we've got now. It's better than all the other options out there. So that's something that I'm willing to take on and go, yeah.
I think, the studies I've seen, if I can respond to that, the studies I've seen show, yeah, this doesn't matter unless it really matters, unless there's, more than two candidates that are very strong candidates. And I'm sure if this scenario happens, there's going to be outrage. There's going to be voter outrage because it's an irrational, illogical result. The other thing that's related to this, and again, I'll pick on the Begich-Peltola-Palin race. What happens when, in the scenario where Begich got eliminated in the first round, even though a huge number of Palin voters picked him second? Once Begich is eliminated, those second-ranked choices for Palin, they don't matter. They could have ranked nobody. They could have ranked somebody else. They don't matter anymore. And I think that's a huge problem, because when we started, you had all these rankings and you could see all this data, and it showed Begich was the preferred candidate over Palin and over Peltola in head-to-head. But once you started doing the instant runoff and you knocked Begich off the beginning, all that data is thrown away. All that voter preference information for a big chunk of the voting population is thrown away. So I think those kinds of issues, well, that's exactly why this thing is being recalled. That's why we have a grassroots effort in Alaska to repeal ranked choice voting, because they looked at the same data that I'm seeing and they're saying this isn't right. It's just not fair. It's not democratic. It's not representative.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for your group's work. Well done.
Thank you.
Elise,
All right. So our next group is Kobe, Jim, Sandra, and Sandra. Shall we get a Sandra?
So one of the Sandras got chosen because I had pen and paper handy. So you might have already answered this question, but this is for Representative Diehl. Someone recalled you saying that somehow this would, or maybe I don't know who said it, but the statement came out that the ranked choice voting would redefine what a majority is. So could you give us a little more clarity on that?
I'll give you an example. So let's say we have an election where there's 100 votes. Everyone would say a majority is 51, right? So through the ranking process, the instant runoff, 20 ballots are exhausted. They either had errors, or they didn't fill all the rankings out, or their preferred candidates didn't make it to the final rounds. So let's say those 20 ballots are exhausted. That leaves 80 ballots left. In the ranked choice voting world, now 41 is a majority. It's a majority of remaining ballots. And that's not obvious to everybody when you read the ballot title and look. So that's what I mean by they had to redefine what majority means. To me, 41 is not a majority. There were 100 voters. And in New York City, they had a situation, 15% of the voters, 140,000 votes, were exhausted before that final round. That's 140,000 votes that didn't participate in the runoff election for whatever reason.
And if I can chime in there,
Sure.
if I can chime in real quick, we have that now. Sandra, it's good to see you. As you know, we've got over and under votes. Not everybody fills it out. Not everybody fills it out correctly. So exhausted ballots are still going to be over and under votes, the same thing that we absolutely have now. Some of it's going to be because people choose to have it. And with the system that we have now with plurality voting in a 3-person race, you can have 34% of the votes and still win. That's not even close to any kind of definition for majority. That's why it's called plurality. And so the definition, it's majority that make it to the final round. Everybody has the opportunity to rank every candidate. Then you'll have a majority at the back end of it. But we know that human nature is, as Ed said, out of 100 people, you're going to have a certain amount of ballots that are going to be exhausted for one reason or the other. And you're always not going to have that. So it's the same scenario that we have now, but it's better than what we have now. And we have all the same terms because we still have exhausted ballots. We just go by a different name of over and under votes.
But the error rate with ballots is considerably higher with ranked choice voting, and there's a disparate impact. This probably concerns me more than anything. This huge disparate impact based on your income level, education level, race, age. There's significant differences, like those examples I gave in Minneapolis. New York City has seen the same thing. Other municipalities have seen this. And go ahead.
One of our people really requested where to find the study. So if there's a way to put some more links in the chat or somehow to get some links for the studies. Well, another question is has to do with the order that the ballots are counted in. Wouldn't the order of the ballots being counted automatically determine the winner? For example, I'm in a congressional district where if you counted the ballots first from the more conservative part of the district, you might actually eliminate someone before you counted the votes from the other section of the district. Do you see what we're trying to get clarity on?
Yeah, well, that's why you have to bring all the ballots to one location and run them all together, because you can't count them out up in a precinct level and then roll that up to a county level and so on. It's just impossible with ranked choice voting.
So is there a way in a computer system to keep them at the same point in time? I'm thinking ballots are counted in a linear fashion. Am I wrong?
Oh, I see. What you would do is you'd bring all the ballots in and you tally everything in the first round. You sum up first choice. Yep. And then you say, oh, this guy got the least votes. He's disqualified. Then you transfer his votes to the other people and look at those totals.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's an iterative process, but you have to have all the ballots together.
Okay, got it. Thank you. One last question. Oh, sorry, time's up. But Colorado, Idaho, Montana, and Nevada have this on the ballot. Don't all those states have open primaries or planning on opening the primaries?
I know Idaho's. I think all of them are going to go with open primaries. I'd be surprised if one doesn't.
Yeah, that definitely changes the dynamic. I don't know why Oregon didn't eliminate or didn't go open primary. I'm not sure what the decision making was behind this.
Thank you, Sandra. Elise, next group.
All right, we're in our final two groups. So next up, Karen, Rochelle, and Adam, and Sheila.
Hi, I'm Rochelle. I'm the spokesperson. Our group was curious what proportion of areas who have tried ranked choice voting have stuck with it versus abandoning it. And we're fine if you talk about outside the United States.
Well, I have a number with inside the United States. Ranked choice voting isn't new. It's been around a long time, and it comes in different flavors a little bit. We just talked about one. There's jungle primaries like Alaska. There's partisan primaries like we have. But roughly in its current form, it's been tried and repealed 85 times in the United States. Now, I don't think that it's been repealed in jurisdictions. That might have been a town or a county, but 85 times it's been tried and repealed. I don't think that's happened in the last 12 years, but I would say what's happened in the last 12 years is there are groups with lots of money, deep pockets, pumping hundreds of millions of dollars into states like Oregon, Alaska, and so on, to get ranked choice voting passed and to prop it up. That's the difference between the last 12 years and what was happening before.
And I don't disagree with Ed's 85 number. I don't know it, so I just don't disagree with it. But we currently have 50 jurisdictions. The one number I do know is that Utah did a pilot study. They had 21 cities sign up. 10 decided not to renew it. And when I talked to the Utah ranked choice voting representative, it's because of the party. The GOP party couldn't do it, and he couldn't. In those cities were very strong GOP cities. So most of the places that are anti, not all, because as Ed talked about, there are a couple Democratic parties in Oregon. A lot of them are hard right GOP, but a lot of them are going to be on the heavy on the Democrat side as well. So again, it's parties that don't like it, not necessarily people. And with respect to the organizations that put money into it, those are your pro democracy, your pro efficient government agencies that are doing it. That's where the organizations are coming from. So there is money and there is an effort nationwide. And that's why you're seeing it in so many states, is because of where we're at nationally in our political system with identity politics and everything else that we see on the news. This is the current thought. How can we reduce that? And how can we get back to voting and changing our political rhetoric?
Well, I got to comment on something you said there. These groups that are funding this are very, very progressive groups. They're far to the left. They're not middle of the roaders. And so I would ask, they're dumping millions of dollars into Oregon now to pass ranked choice voting, about $4 million or so to date. Is their goal to moderate Oregon? Is their goal to bring the electorate more toward the middle, more Republican? I don't think that's their goal. And I don't know what their intent is, but I don't think that's their goal. And for one thing, we know that that's not what ranked choice voting does in the first place. It has a center squeeze effect. It tends to bring the electorate, the candidates, to more extreme. So that's my concern, is they're backing it with a lot of money from one side. The Green Party wants to see this. The Communist Party wants to see this. Democrat Socialists of America want to see this. So that's my concern.
Your point about the center squeeze effect brings up our second question, which is how often do the top two lose? I know we heard an example, but how often does that happen?
The top two, if you look at all the scenario with the center squeeze, take out the not getting a true majority, that happens a lot. That happens probably half the time. But the center squeeze, the spoiler effect, the wonkiness where it's called the monotonicity rule, where, if you would have had fewer first place votes, you would have won. Those happen, they think, between like 7 and 15% of the time, which is a lot. That really is a lot. And 7 to 15% of cases where there is more than two viable candidates. And here's what happens. Like Corvallis has been doing this for a few years. They've only had one election cycle where they went into a second round. So you have two candidates. It's like ranked choice voting doesn't even exist. And then they have two elections, one for mayor and one for Ward 9, I think, city councilor, something like that went into a second round. So you're not going to see these weird things until it really matters, until you have 3 or 4 strong candidates. That's when these things come out, and that's when our people are going to be really upset about this system.
All right, Elise, it looks like we're ready for our last group.
All right. Charlotte, Deidre, Julie, Linda, and Ross, bring us home.
I think I'm the spokesperson because I was the one who was tracking the questions. So correct me if I'm wrong, group. And many of the questions have been answered or addressed. Offline, we would love both speakers to provide as extensive a list of resources as they can, links. I know one's been provided, but other links for all of the stats that they refer to. We'd love to look at those afterwards and really study this more carefully. So please do provide that. Of that question, the one piece that I would maybe could be answered now is maybe from Charlie is, what have you seen that's been improvements in the system in places where it's been adopted and maybe not great to begin with. What kinds of improvements have been implemented?
Are you talking about with the outcomes for the candidates or system changes once
The
they admitted
systems,
that they made
making the system work better?
Some of them, not talking to the officials from Oakland, they're going from 2 to, I think, 3 number of folks that you can rank. So there's been some iterations along those lines. I haven't talked to folks directly from Maine to see what minor modifications, again, with Maine physically transporting. That's very different than what we have, what will probably happen in Oregon, where it's going to be digital. With Alaska, which comes up a lot because they're one of the case studies. They've had a couple very contentious races and a couple high-profile races, and there is a strong contingent of Alaskans that want to keep it, that love it. And so it is, some of that iteration is on the informational education side. Because this is a new system, it's educating people of what to do, what to think about, how this goes. And so some of the iterations that I know of and can think of off the top of my head are going to be more on the administrative and operational side, so that voters know what to expect and how to fill out your ballots.
Yeah, that's our second one of the questions that hasn't been addressed as fully is what do you think can be done in Oregon to minimize confusion and error by the voters? What specifically do you think could be implemented to, offset the English as a second language people that are older and not used to the system, all that. What are your ideas?
It is in Alaska's done a good job with this. Other states have already done a good job with the educational outreach, and so it's going to be learning from them. And you saw the video from Maine. To me, that's pretty straightforward, simple video. That's, Ed and I both like that video because it clearly demonstrates how you can do that, and it gives that basic information. And again, it's going to be rolling down to your civics classes in high school, and getting people to know and understand early on that this is the way it goes. But it's going to be outreach. It's going to be outreach to community groups, to civic organizations, whether it's going to be the Rotary Club or Elks Club or whoever else, to get out there and have these conversations. Because the mechanics are pretty simple. Most of us has filled out a Scantron sheet. We can fill in bubbles and we can rank things because that's what we do as humans every day. So the mechanics aren't difficult, but it's alleviating some of the concerns that people are going to have, whether they get into the in-depth side about the operational, about the cost, or about the transparency or the auditing. Some people want to know and they want to get into those weeds. So we've got to have those materials for that. But for the bulk of people, they're not going to want to know that. And so it's giving people the information that they can digest and that they're interested in knowing. And we don't have to recreate it. We just have to take and use what the states currently have. There are 50 jurisdictions throughout the country that do this, or throughout the states. So we've got a lot of examples.
One of the things you said is to have less numbers of people to be ranked. And are you saying there'd be less people on the ballot for that position, or less numbers of choices you have to rank? Are you saying that you would limit how many people can run for a position, or you limit how many choices there are for ranking?
So separating Portland aside, and that they've got multiple candidates for seats, because they've got multiple seats available. I don't want to get to a system where our ranked choice voting has 15 candidates. To me, that's why we need the primary side of this, is so that we can limit that and get down to those 3, 4, or 5. I don't want to ranked choice vote 8 people. I want to keep it minimal so that we can all understand it and that we can do the research and things necessary for us to vote.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Elise, that
does it. That does it. We've heard questions from every group. Thank you, groups.
Wow.
Thank you all very much. Like the questions.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Ed, and thank you, Charlie, for what I would characterize as a rather extraordinary evening of a civics lesson in how 2 of our state representatives, who ultimately will have to be among the group that actually decides how we reform elections in our state, can come together, disagree fundamentally on certain issues, And yet I was struck by how many times they agreed with each other, found common ground, and one of my favorite things when I say compromise, they quoted one another. I loved it. It was
Well, I'll have
truly,
to watch out for that next time.
it was truly a civic. It was truly a civics lesson, and I'm sure you gave all our participants an awful lot to chew on. As we, of course, now all have to think about what we're going to do in a couple of weeks when we face this issue on our ballot. So thank you again to both of you for your time and your energy and all of the information you brought to bear on the subject. And now what I want to do, because it's getting late, is a few last administrative things so we can wrap up this workshop. All right. So here are a few last important businesses that we have here at Braver Angels. We do evaluations at the end of all of our events. We use these to improve our workshops, and trust me, it has worked way, way well over the last few years. And we ask you to give us demographic data so that we understand more about the participants that take part in our workshops. We don't share these bits of data with anybody else. Now, what I'm going to do is give you a minute or two right now to start an evaluation of this particular deliberative workshop this evening. Use your camera on your smart device. You can point it at the barcode on the screen. If I have my information right, there will also be a barcode that you'll be able to find in the chat room. You don't necessarily have to finish the evaluation before we end the meeting, but if you start it now, please finish it as soon as you're done. So I'm going to give you a minute or two to get this done, to get at least the barcode up in your phone or from the chat room. And please take the time when you're done with this workshop to finish it for us. We really value your input. And again, many thanks to my Braver Angel colleagues for keeping me on track and keeping us on time and getting us to the end. And again, to our two guests, very, very great appreciation from Braver Angels for making this a very successful workshop.
Absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity. It's an important issue.
Yeah, I loved it. I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed all the questions. Appreciate it. You did a great job, Terry.
And last
You
but
too,
not
Lee.
least, before we finish the workshop, we'd like to suggest some possible next steps. Braver Angels next step. You can learn about the movement by subscribing to our newsletter, reading about our platform, or following or sharing us on social media. You can also build a new set of skills by taking an e-course or attending one of our debates or attending one of our many workshops. If you subscribe to Braver Angels, which last time I checked was $12 a year, you have access to tons of information about both local and national workshops and activities where you can continue your efforts to expand your skills and knowledge. And then, of course, you can volunteer to take action by becoming a member and get involved in one of the many volunteer organizations that operate both nationally and on the local level. So, unless one of my colleagues has something else they want to say, I will say auf Wiedersehen for this evening. Thank you for participating. It was a terrific workshop.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Great job, y'all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody's going to be ranked choice voting in their dreams tonight. It's going to be.
Thank you. Great event. Thank you.
Great program. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Well done.